In this exercise, I'm going to show you how to set up a simple but effective system of guides. And by that I mean we need some guides that cut this graphic right in half so we know the dead center point. And we can do that by converting an object that we'll draw into a guide. And one of the terrific things about Illustrator is that anything you draw can become a snappable guide. So you can even turn circles into snappable guides if you want to. Now, I'm working in that document we created in the previous exercise. It's just a new graphic that's 800 points wide and 500 points tall. That'll become important in just a moment. I'm going to get this little line tool panel out of my face there by dragging it into the swatches panel. It can just live there for a while. And now I'll press Control-R or Command-R on a Mac to bring up the rulers, because in another program, you would just make a bunch of ruler guides, right? Well, you can do that inside of Illustrator. There's the 0, 0 point by default in the upper left-hand corner of the page here in CS5. And I know that this page is 500 points tall, so I should be able to drag a guideline down to 250, but you got me where 250 is. Is 252 above the number or below the number? And even if I knew the answer to that question, I wouldn't know exactly where 250 was, because there's not enough tick marks and I'd have to zoom in. And why bother when it's so much simpler to create a custom guide? Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to get rid of that guideline. And then I'll press Control-R or Command-R on the Mac to get rid of the rulers. We don't need them. Here's what we do need. I'll go over to my little line tool panel and let's drag it back out again so we can see it a little better there. Right there is a rectangular grid tool. I'd like you to go ahead and select it like so, and then draw from one corner of your page to the other, like so, in order to create a custom grid. Now, you may look at that and say, well, that's pretty custom, I guess. We can see the central lines after all, but there's so many other lines that this might turn out to be a little bit confusing. Well, a couple of different ways to work. If I press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac, I'll get rid of that guy. And then if I click in the upper left corner of the page, rather than drag, just click, then I'll bring up the rectangular grid tool options dialog box. And notice that it wants to go ahead and create a grid that's 800 points wide by 500 points tall, the exact dimensions of my page. How smart is that? Well, that's not what it's really doing. It's taking the information from the last graphic you drew. And that's how nearly all of these dialog boxes work. When you click with one of these tools, they're going to present you with the last thing you did, which is actually a great trick. Then you can specify the number of dividers you want, and I think I just want one horizontal divider and one vertical divider, and then you can skew the dividers one direction or other. If you don't want them right in the center, you want them offset. In our case, we don't want any kind of skew. We'll leave those values alone. We don't want to fill the grid. We do want to go ahead and use the outside rectangle as a frame, and we want to create the grid from the upper left corner, which is what we'll get by default because that upper left icon is selected. Then click OK, and we get exactly what I was looking for. But I'm going to show you another way to work, just so that you have a sense of how to play with this tool. I'll press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of that guy once again, and I'll draw a manual frame like so from corner to corner. And then, while I still have my mouse button down, so I'm in the middle of drawing my graphic, I can press arrow keys to change the number of dividers. So if I want to increase the number of horizontal dividers, I press the up arrow key. If I want to decrease the number of horizontal dividers, I press the down arrow key. You can even reduce it to 0 if you want, like so. But I do want one divider. If you press the right arrow key, you'll increase the number of vertical dividers. If you press the left arrow key, you'll decrease the number of those dividers. Then once you get a sufficient number of dividers into place, go ahead and release your mouse button and you will draw that graphic. Now at this point, if you twirl open layer 1 right there, you'll see that you've drawn a grouped graphic. If you twirl it open, you'll see that it's made of a combination of 3 paths. One's the rectangle, so the rectangle around the entire edge, and the other 2 are the horizontal line and the vertical line. So these are just lines and shapes inside of Illustrator so far. They'd actually print and everything. What we want is non-printing snappable guides so that our objects snap into place. And you can convert the grid to a guide by making sure it's selected as it is, and then going up to the View menu, choosing the Guides command, and then choosing this command right there, Make Guides, which happens to have a keyboard shortcut of Control-5 or Command-5 on the Mac if you care to assign that one to memory. I personally never have, but anyway, there it is. And as soon as you choose that command, you now have snappable guides. Now I'm going to switch over to my black arrow tool for a moment, and I'm going to click on one of these guides, and I don't select it because it's locked down by default. If I go up to the view menu, go down to guides, I will see that lock guides is turned on, and that's generally a good thing. However, if you decide you need to edit a guideline, move it around, then you need to turn off lock guides before you do so. Just want you to note that that command is there. But in our case, we want to leave those guides locked. And notice with that little effort, we have correctly identified the center of our illustration.